66 million years ago, Earth was home to a diverse range of life, with dinosaurs reigning as the dominant species. These creatures, some towering several stories high, had roamed the planet for over 160 million years. From the towering sauropods to the fearsome tyrannosaurs, dinosaurs had adapted to virtually every environment, spreading across the globe and evolving into an incredible variety of species. But on one fateful day, their world changed forever. What caused this extinction was an asteroid, an enormous space rock estimated to be about 10 kilometers, 6 miles wide. Hurtling through space at an estimated 20 kilometers per second, 45,000 miles per hour, it was on a collision course with Earth. When it struck, it did so with such force that it unleashed the energy of billions of atomic bombs. The impact site was what is now known as the Chicxulub crater on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. It's difficult to comprehend the scale of this collision. The asteroid's impact released energy equivalent to more than 100 trillion tons of TNT, creating a blast that instantly vaporized the surrounding environment and sent shockwaves through the Earth's crust. The immediate effects were catastrophic. When the asteroid hit, it created a massive explosion, and the surrounding region was instantly incinerated. Everything within hundreds of miles was obliterated in an instant, and the shockwave traveled even farther, leveling forests, vaporizing lakes, and causing the land to buckle and split. A firestorm of unimaginable proportions began sweeping across the continents. Even thousands of miles away, the heat from the impact ignited wildfires, burning vast regions of forests and vegetation to the ground. But the destruction didn't stop there. The asteroid's impact also triggered immense seismic activity, causing earthquakes that likely registered at magnitudes beyond anything modern humans have ever experienced. These earthquakes, rippling across the globe, created tsunamis hundreds of feet high, crashing into coastlines with such force that they reshaped entire shorelines. Vast amounts of molten rock were ejected into the atmosphere, and clouds of superheated gas, ash, and dust billowed into the sky. The sky, once bright and full of sunlight, quickly turned dark. The dust, debris, and soot from the fires, along with sulfur-rich particles from vaporized rock, began to fill the atmosphere, effectively blocking out the sun. In the immediate aftermath, this darkness would have plunged the planet into a state of near total darkness for weeks or even months. This impact winter caused temperatures to plummet, dramatically altering the planet's climate. Without sunlight, photosynthesis in plants stopped almost entirely, which had a catastrophic impact on the food chain, starting with the plants and rippling upward through herbivores and carnivores alike. The drop in temperature created a rapid cooling of the Earth, and even species that were not directly killed by the blast and fires were now faced with a world completely transformed. Most dinosaurs, being cold-blooded creatures, were particularly vulnerable to these abrupt climate shifts. With global temperatures dropping drastically, their large bodies struggled to cope with the cold. In addition to freezing conditions, acid rain began to fall, caused by the release of sulfur compounds from the vaporized rocks. This rain further damaged the environment, killing off plants and poisoning water supplies. The effects of the asteroid impact weren't confined to the surface of the Earth. Deep within the oceans, the asteroid impact caused massive changes. Tidal waves and underwater earthquakes disturbed marine ecosystems, and the loss of sunlight caused plankton populations to collapse. As plankton formed the base of the oceanic food chain, its decline had ripple effects throughout the marine environment, leading to mass die-offs of marine species, including some of the largest sea-dwelling reptiles of the time. The dinosaurs, who had flourished in an Earth teeming with life and resources, suddenly found themselves in a world where food was scarce, temperatures were freezing, and environmental hazards like toxic rain and wildfires were widespread. While some smaller creatures, especially mammals and certain types of reptiles, managed to burrow or shelter to survive the initial aftermath, the dinosaurs, particularly the larger species, had no such defenses. The Earth's climate and ecosystems, which they had long dominated, were now entirely hostile to their survival. The asteroid impact also set off a chain of volcanic activity across the planet, especially in what is now known as the Deccan Traps in India. These volcanic eruptions further contributed to the climatic chaos, releasing enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere, which alternated between a cooling phase and a greenhouse effect. This created an unstable climate, oscillating between cold and heat, further stressing the fragile ecosystems that were trying to recover. As the dust settled, the Earth was left in a state of utter devastation. Over time, the debris from the impact began to fall back to Earth, but the atmospheric effects lingered. Scientists believe that the lack of sunlight and the cold persisted for months, if not years, after the impact. The planet had been thrown into a dramatic shift, one that would take millions of years to fully recover from. But for the dinosaurs, there was no coming back from this event. Their age of dominance had ended in the blink of an eye, brought to a brutal conclusion by the forces of the universe. This catastrophic event, often referred to as the KT, Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, was one of the most significant in Earth's history, wiping out approximately 75% of all species. The sheer speed and ferocity of the asteroid's impact ensured that many species were driven to extinction almost immediately, while others lingered only briefly as the planet's ecosystems unraveled. However, as devastating as the event was, it also paved the way for new forms of life. The Earth's environment, once dominated by towering dinosaurs, would now begin a long process of recovery, leading to the rise of mammals and, eventually, humans. In the immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact, the Earth was left unrecognizable. Entire ecosystems were obliterated and the global climate was in turmoil. But even in the darkest of times, life found a way to continue. The survivors of this extinction event, small mammals, birds, and other resilient species, were poised to inherit a world transformed, one in which the mighty dinosaurs would no longer roam. In the wake of the asteroid impact, the world was plunged into chaos, but not all dinosaurs died immediately. The initial devastation was undeniably catastrophic, but it's important to understand that some species of dinosaurs likely survived the first few moments, hours, or even days after the asteroid hit. These survivors, however, would soon face insurmountable challenges as the post-impact environment rapidly became more hostile. Still, the possibility of survival for a short time after the event paints a more complex picture of how life struggled during the extinction process. Immediately following the impact, some regions of the Earth, particularly those farther from the epicenter in what is now Mexico, may have experienced a delay in the full effects of the asteroid's destructive power. Dinosaurs living in areas far from the direct blast zone may have initially survived, albeit in a world thrown into violent chaos. In fact, there's a strong possibility that some species, especially those that were smaller or lived in more remote, isolated areas, managed to escape the immediate destruction. The first few hours after the asteroid's impact would have been an experience of sheer terror. Dinosaurs outside the immediate blast radius, such as those living in parts of Asia, Africa, or Australia, would have felt the Earth shaking violently as the seismic waves from the impact rippled across the globe. These seismic tremors could have triggered landslides, volcanic activity, and other regional disasters. Some dinosaurs would have instinctively fled from these events, finding temporary shelter in forests, valleys, or caves. The intense shock waves that circled the Earth could have injured some dinosaurs or displaced them from their habitats. Yet many would have still been alive, unaware that their ultimate doom was unfolding. For those lucky enough to have survived the initial blast and fires, the environment would quickly become a struggle for survival. Food sources became scarce almost immediately. As the sky darkened with ash and debris, the photosynthesis process in plants began to shut down. This had a cascading effect on herbivorous dinosaurs, which suddenly found themselves without sufficient plant matter to consume. These plant-eating dinosaurs were the foundation of many ecosystems, and their gradual starvation would have a ripple effect, impacting carnivorous dinosaurs that depended on them for food. Even if these herbivores had enough energy to last a few days or weeks, they would eventually face starvation as the plant life died off. Smaller dinosaurs, particularly those that could scavenge or adapt their diets, may have had a better chance of surviving in the short term. Some evidence suggests that certain types of theropods, smaller, bird-like dinosaurs, might have had the ability to forage for insects, small animals, or even carcasses left behind by the dying megafauna. These species had certain advantages: smaller body sizes, greater mobility, and possibly better adaptability to changing conditions. In fact, many paleontologists theorize that some of these smaller theropods evolved into modern birds, which are considered direct descendants of the dinosaurs. However, the world wasn't just dealing with a food shortage, it was also becoming uninhabitable in many ways. As fires continued to burn across large parts of the planet, massive amounts of smoke and particulates filled the atmosphere. Acid rain, triggered by the release of sulfur and other chemicals into the atmosphere, began falling in some regions. This acidified water sources and poisoned vegetation, making survival even harder for those species trying to hold on. Herbivores in particular would have struggled as their usual food sources not only disappeared but became toxic or inedible. The burning of forests and grasslands also contributed to the depletion of oxygen in some areas, creating a suffocating environment for both plant and animal life. Temperature fluctuations were another major factor that impacted survival. As the dust and debris from the impact filled the atmosphere, sunlight was blocked, plunging the Earth into a temporary but extreme cooling phase. This period, often referred to as the impact winter, drastically reduced global temperatures. Large, cold-blooded dinosaurs would have faced significant difficulties adapting to this rapid temperature drop. With their massive bodies, dinosaurs like the long-necked sauropods would have struggled to generate enough internal heat, making them highly vulnerable to the freezing temperatures. Yet, there were still isolated environments where some dinosaurs could have clung to life a little longer. Areas around the equator, for example, might not have experienced the same degree of cooling as higher latitudes. Some regions might have retained enough plant life for herbivores to survive a little while longer. Additionally, coastal or riverine ecosystems may have offered temporary refuge for some species, particularly those that relied on aquatic food sources. Dinosaurs living in these relatively sheltered environments might have delayed the inevitable, but their fates were still sealed. In these final days and weeks, dinosaurs that managed to survive the initial catastrophe found themselves in an increasingly barren world. The collapse of plant life triggered the collapse of herbivore populations, and without prey, carnivorous dinosaurs began to suffer as well. It's possible that some carnivores, like Tyrannosaurus rex or smaller dromaeosaurs, may have been able to survive by scavenging the remains of herbivores that perished in the aftermath, but this would have only been a temporary solution. As the availability of food dwindled, even these apex predators would have faced starvation. One of the critical aspects of survival in this post-impact world was adaptability. Smaller animals, particularly those with burrowing behaviors, likely had a higher chance of survival because they could escape the worst of the environmental hazards. Some scientists believe that small mammals and certain reptiles had the advantage of being able to hibernate or burrow to avoid the extreme conditions above ground. Dinosaurs, however, with their large sizes and high energy demands, lacked this ability, making their survival far more difficult. There is some evidence, though controversial, that a few species of dinosaurs may have survived for several years after the impact. Fossil records suggest that certain isolated pockets of life, particularly in the southern hemisphere, could have harbored surviving dinosaurs for a brief period. In some areas, the effects of the impact may not have been as immediately severe, allowing for a brief continuation of life. However, as the global environment continued to deteriorate, even these survivors eventually succumbed. In the end, despite their initial resilience, the dinosaurs' fate was sealed by the cascade of environmental effects set off by the asteroid impact. As food sources disappeared, temperatures plummeted, and toxic rain fell, their ecosystems unraveled. Large-bodied dinosaurs, which had once thrived in a warm, resource-rich world, could not adapt to the rapid changes. The survival of the fittest no longer applied to the dinosaurs. Instead, it became a game of endurance, and their highly specialized bodies were ill-suited for the drastically altered planet. The last days of the dinosaurs were marked by a slow, inevitable decline. The very traits that had made them so successful during the millions of years they ruled the Earth, large bodies, specialization in particular ecosystems, and reliance on abundant resources were the very traits that made them vulnerable in a post-impact world. While some species may have survived a little longer than others, their inability to adapt to the harsh new conditions ensured their extinction. In the final analysis, though some dinosaurs survived for a time after the asteroid impact, their days were numbered. The world they had known was gone, replaced by a harsh, unforgiving environment. In their place, smaller, more adaptable species began to thrive, setting the stage for the rise of mammals and the eventual dominance of humans. The age of the dinosaurs, which had lasted for over 160 million years, had come to a tragic and sudden end. The asteroid impact that struck the Earth 66 million years ago set off a series of catastrophic environmental changes that far outlasted the initial explosion and firestorm. While the direct effects of the impact, such as the blast, wildfires and tsunamis, were devastating, the long-term consequences were even more lethal for the survival of life on Earth, particularly the dinosaurs. These effects created a domino chain of environmental collapse that made it nearly impossible for most life forms, especially large dinosaurs, to survive in the months and years that followed the asteroid's impact. One of the most significant effects of the asteroid strike was the amount of dust and debris it threw into the atmosphere. In an instant, tons of pulverized rock and soot were ejected into the air, blocking out sunlight across the globe. This created what is often referred to as a nuclear winter scenario. The impact winter caused temperatures to plummet almost overnight, and the Earth was cast into darkness for weeks, if not months. Without sunlight, photosynthesis in plants all but ceased. Plants that had survived the fires and physical destruction of the impact zone began to die off rapidly due to the lack of light. The collapse of plant life was the first major blow to the dinosaurs, especially herbivorous species, which relied entirely on vegetation for food. Dinosaurs like the long-necked sauropods, which required vast amounts of plant matter to sustain their massive bodies, found themselves without a food source. The once abundant forests and grasslands that had been their primary food supply quickly disappeared. Without plants, these large herbivores began to starve, and their populations plummeted. As herbivorous dinosaurs died off, it created a ripple effect throughout the food chain. Carnivorous dinosaurs, such as Tyrannosaurus rex and other apex predators, relied on these large herbivores for sustenance. As the populations of herbivores dwindled, so too did the food supply for these carnivores. At first, many carnivores may have turned to scavenging the carcasses of dead herbivores, but this was only a temporary solution. Without a steady supply of prey, even the most formidable predators faced starvation. The collapse of the plant-based food chain meant that the entire ecosystem was unraveling, and no species could escape the consequences. This domino effect was not limited to land-based ecosystems. The collapse of photosynthesis also affected marine environments. Plankton, the microscopic organisms that form the foundation of the oceanic food chain, relied on sunlight for energy. As sunlight was blocked by the debris in the atmosphere, plankton populations crashed. This had a devastating impact on marine life, including fish, mollusks, and larger marine reptiles. As plankton disappeared, the marine food chain began to collapse in much the same way as it did on land, leading to mass die-offs in the oceans. Large marine reptiles, such as mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, which had ruled the seas, were particularly hard hit by this environmental collapse. Adding to the devastation, volcanic activity likely increased in the aftermath of the asteroid impact. The Chicxulub impact was so powerful that it not only caused immediate seismic disruptions, but also likely triggered massive volcanic eruptions around the world, particularly in regions like the Deccan Traps in present-day India. These eruptions released vast amounts of volcanic gases into the atmosphere, including sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. The sulfur dioxide contributed to the already darkened skies by adding more particles to the atmosphere, which further blocked sunlight and prolonged the impact winter. The sulfur compounds released by these volcanic eruptions also contributed to acid rain, which further damaged the environment. Acid rain, with its high levels of sulfuric and nitric acids, poisoned rivers, lakes and oceans, and it killed off the remaining plant life that had managed to survive the initial impact and fires. Even if some areas had pockets of surviving vegetation, the acid rain would have made it nearly impossible for plants to regenerate, and it would have contaminated the drinking water supplies for all land-dwelling creatures. This environmental toxicity added yet another layer of difficulty for dinosaurs trying to survive in the post-impact world. In addition to the cooling caused by the debris in the atmosphere, the volcanic activity released large amounts of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. Over time, this caused a shift from the initial period of cooling to a longer-term phase of global warming. This unstable climate, which alternated between extreme cold and extreme heat, further stressed the surviving species. Many dinosaurs, especially the larger ones, had adapted to relatively stable climatic conditions during the Cretaceous period. They were not equipped to handle such rapid and dramatic swings in temperature. The combination of freezing conditions followed by global warming created an environment that was hostile to life at nearly every level. The sudden change in climate also altered the landscapes that dinosaurs had once dominated. Forests that had once thrived in warm, moist conditions were replaced by barren, desolate landscapes. With plant life decimated, soils eroded, and entire ecosystems collapsed. Wetlands dried up, rivers changed their courses, and coastlines shifted due to rising and falling sea levels. The environmental collapse was so complete that even areas far from the original impact site, such as Antarctica or Central Asia, experienced radical changes in their ecosystems. No place on Earth was spared from the aftermath of the asteroid impact. Another critical aspect of the environmental collapse was the disruption of the atmospheric oxygen levels. Wildfires and volcanic activity released massive amounts of carbon monoxide and other gases, which could have affected the availability of breathable oxygen. Some scientists speculate that the overall oxygen levels in the atmosphere dropped in the aftermath of the asteroid impact. This would have made it even more difficult for large animals, including dinosaurs, to breathe. While mammals and birds, which had more efficient respiratory systems, might have been able to cope with reduced oxygen levels, dinosaurs with their larger bodies and different respiratory systems would have struggled to survive in these conditions. Even smaller dinosaur species, which might have had a better chance of surviving the initial impact and its immediate aftermath, were not immune to the long-term effects of the environmental collapse. Many smaller dinosaurs, including bird-like theropods, faced the same challenges as larger dinosaurs: lack of food, toxic rain, freezing temperatures, and disrupted ecosystems. While some of these smaller species may have survived a little longer, they too eventually succumbed to the harsh post-impact environment. However, it is thought that some of these smaller theropods, particularly those closely related to modern birds, managed to adapt and evolve into the ancestors of today's birds. The environmental collapse triggered by the asteroid impact was a multi-layered and relentless process. It wasn't just one factor that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was the combination of events that unfolded over months, years, and even centuries. Each factor, whether it was the lack of sunlight, the collapse of the food chain, the acid rain, the freezing temperatures, or the volcanic activity contributed to the death of ecosystems that had supported life for millions of years. For dinosaurs, particularly the large, specialized species that had dominated Earth for so long, these changes were simply too much to overcome. It's important to note that this environmental collapse wasn't immediate. While the asteroid impact set off the chain of events, the extinction process took time to unfold. Some dinosaurs may have survived for months, possibly even years, after the initial impact. But the cumulative effect of these environmental changes meant that survival became increasingly impossible. Each generation of dinosaurs was faced with harsher conditions, fewer resources, and a world that was growing more inhospitable by the day. By the time the full effects of the environmental collapse had taken hold, the age of the dinosaurs had come to an end. After dominating the Earth for over 160 million years, their reign was over. The environmental changes that swept across the planet were too severe for them to adapt to. While some smaller species of birds, reptiles, and mammals managed to survive and eventually thrive in the post-impact world, the dinosaurs, except for their avian descendants, were gone. The domino effect of environmental collapse that followed the asteroid impact illustrates how interconnected life on Earth truly is. The extinction of the dinosaurs wasn't just the result of one event. It was the consequence of a complex chain reaction that unfolded over time. Each piece of the ecosystem was dependent on another, and when the foundation of that system, plant life, collapsed, the entire structure came crashing down. The environmental changes created a world that was no longer suited to the mighty dinosaurs, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. As the world continued to change drastically in the aftermath of the asteroid impact, the final chapter in the story of the dinosaurs' extinction played out over what was likely a span of several thousand years. Although the initial impact and environmental collapse set in motion a near-total wipeout of life on Earth, there is evidence to suggest that some dinosaurs persisted in isolated pockets for a brief time after the catastrophe. These survivors, however, would have faced increasingly insurmountable odds in a world that no longer resembled the thriving ecosystems they had once dominated. In the months following the impact, much of the Earth remained in a state of darkness due to the debris and ash that filled the atmosphere. But as the skies gradually began to clear, a new and desolate landscape emerged. For the dinosaurs that somehow survived the initial chaos, their world had fundamentally changed. Vast regions that were once covered in dense forests and lush vegetation were now barren wastelands. Massive wildfires had scorched the Earth, leaving behind charred remains of once vibrant ecosystems. Rivers had changed course, lakes had dried up, and coastlines were reshaped by the immense tsunamis that followed the impact. The air itself was often toxic, laced with chemicals from volcanic eruptions and acid rain. These surviving dinosaurs, if any had indeed made it through, would have been scattered across the planet in small, isolated groups. Large herbivores like Triceratops or Hadrosaurs, which had once traveled in great herds, would have struggled to find enough food to sustain themselves. With most plant life decimated, these herbivores would have had to scour the landscape for any remaining vegetation, perhaps surviving for a while by eating ferns or other hardy plants that could tolerate the harsh conditions. But even these resources were dwindling rapidly. Any survivors among the herbivores were most likely living on borrowed time. In these dying ecosystems, carnivorous dinosaurs such as Tyrannosaurus rex may have also persisted for a time, but their survival was equally tenuous. With herbivore populations in decline, these predators would have been forced to turn to scavenging the remains of dead or dying animals. Fossils from this period, although rare, suggest that some carnivorous dinosaurs may have engaged in opportunistic feeding behaviours during their final days, feeding on anything they could find, whether it was freshly killed or long dead. However, this too could only sustain them for so long. As food sources became increasingly scarce, even the most adaptable carnivores would have found it difficult to survive. For smaller dinosaur species, such as bird-like theropods, there may have been a slightly higher chance of survival, at least in the immediate aftermath. These creatures were likely more adaptable to the changing environment due to their smaller size and potentially more varied diets. Some of these smaller dinosaurs may have been able to feed on insects, small mammals, or even the remains of other animals. However, as the overall ecosystem continued to collapse, even these smaller species would have faced increasing challenges. The insects and other small creatures that many of these dinosaurs relied on for food were also affected by the environmental collapse, leaving few reliable food sources available. It is believed that a small number of bird-like dinosaurs may have survived and evolved into modern birds, but for the majority of dinosaurs, the end was inevitable. The geography of survival was another critical factor during this period. Paleontologists suggest that some regions of the Earth may have been less affected by the asteroid impact than others, creating isolated pockets where dinosaurs might have held out for a brief period. For example, areas near the poles or in remote parts of what is now South America, Africa, or Australia may not have experienced the same degree of immediate devastation as regions closer to the impact site. These areas could have offered temporary refuge for certain species, particularly if they were home to ecosystems that were more resilient to sudden climate shifts. One theory posits that dinosaurs living in these isolated areas might have survived for a few hundred or even a few thousand years after the main extinction event. Fossil evidence from certain regions suggests that some dinosaur species were still present after the asteroid impact, though the evidence is scarce and often debated. These fossil remnants could represent the last vestiges of dinosaur populations, clinging to survival in a world that was no longer conducive to their way of life. However, even in these relatively sheltered areas, the long-term environmental effects would have eventually caught up to the dinosaurs. As global temperatures fluctuated, food sources continued to dwindle, and the ecosystems collapsed. Even these surviving populations would have faced extinction. For many dinosaurs, particularly the larger species, the changing climate would have been one of the most significant factors in their eventual demise. As the Earth's climate shifted from a temporary impact winter to a phase of global warming caused by increased volcanic activity, many species were unable to adapt to the new conditions. Larger dinosaurs, with their enormous body sizes and high energy requirements, were particularly vulnerable to these fluctuations. Their inability to generate enough body heat in colder conditions, combined with the challenge of finding sufficient food in a barren landscape, meant that even the most resilient species were pushed to their limits. In addition to climate changes, the physical environment itself had transformed in ways that made survival difficult. Many habitats that dinosaurs had relied on for millions of years simply no longer existed. Forests had been destroyed, wetlands had dried up, and coastal regions had been reshaped by tsunamis and rising sea levels. As dinosaurs wandered through these altered landscapes in search of food and water, they would have encountered new and unfamiliar challenges. The very ecosystems that had sustained their existence for millions of years were gone, leaving behind only a barren and inhospitable world. The end for the dinosaurs likely came slowly and painfully. As they struggled to adapt to the new reality, their numbers continued to dwindle. Breeding populations became too small to sustain themselves, leading to inbreeding and genetic decline. Younger generations of dinosaurs would have faced increasingly harsh conditions, and the survival rate of hatchlings would have been drastically reduced. As each species reached its tipping point, extinction became inevitable. Paleontologists continue to search for the last dinosaurs, hoping to uncover fossil evidence that can shed light on where and when these ancient creatures finally disappeared. Some believe that the last dinosaurs may have survived in small, isolated populations until as recently as a few thousand years after the asteroid impact. Others argue that the extinction was much more rapid, with most dinosaurs dying off within a few decades or centuries after the event. The fossil record remains incomplete, but what is clear is that by the time the Earth's ecosystems began to recover, the dinosaurs were gone. The extinction of the dinosaurs marks one of the most significant turning points in Earth's history. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs had been the dominant life forms on the planet, evolving into a diverse array of species that filled nearly every ecological niche. They had adapted to changing climates and environments over the course of millions of years, surviving mass extinctions and thriving in a world that had undergone countless transformations. Yet, despite their long reign, they were ultimately unable to survive the rapid and catastrophic changes brought about by the asteroid impact and the ensuing environmental collapse. The last stand of the dinosaurs was a tragic and gradual process. From the moment the asteroid struck, their fate was sealed. But the process of extinction unfolded over time as the world around them disintegrated. Their extinction paved the way for a new era in Earth's history, one in which mammals, birds, and other life forms began to rise and take over the niches once filled by dinosaurs. Though the dinosaurs themselves are gone, their legacy lives on in the form of their avian descendants and in the profound impact they left on the history of life on Earth. As the Earth slowly recovered from the devastation of the asteroid impact, new ecosystems began to emerge. Plants, animals, and microorganisms that had survived the cataclysm began to repopulate the planet, filling the void left by the extinction of the dinosaurs. It would take millions of years for the Earth to fully recover. But in the wake of the dinosaurs' extinction, a new chapter in the history of life had begun. The world that emerged was one where mammals, once small and insignificant, began to evolve and diversify, eventually giving rise to humans. And although the dinosaurs themselves were gone, the world they left behind would never be the same. The extinction of the dinosaurs, brought on by the catastrophic asteroid impact and the resulting environmental collapse, marked the end of an era that had lasted over 160 million years. However, in the ashes of this extinction event, life found a way to begin anew. As the massive dinosaurs disappeared from the landscape, a new group of survivors rose to take their place, ushering in the Cenozoic era, the Age of Mammals. While the dinosaurs' dominance over Earth came to a tragic end, their extinction opened the door for an entirely different kind of evolutionary explosion, one that would eventually lead to the emergence of humans. In the immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact, the world was left in a state of chaos. Yet, despite the widespread destruction, certain species managed to survive. These survivors were not the massive lumbering dinosaurs that had ruled the Earth, but instead, they were the small, unassuming creatures that had lived in the shadows of the giant reptiles. Chief among them were mammals, which, before the extinction, had been small, nocturnal, and relatively insignificant in the grand scale of Earth's ecosystems. Mammals had existed for tens of millions of years before the asteroid impact, but they had never achieved the kind of dominance that the dinosaurs had. For much of the Mesozoic era, mammals were forced to live in the margins, typically as small insect-eating creatures that filled niches the dinosaurs left unoccupied. They were not large or particularly powerful, and many of them lived in burrows, away from the predators that ruled the surface. Yet, it was precisely these traits that allowed mammals to survive when the dinosaurs could not. Their small size, burrowing behavior, and ability to regulate their own body temperature gave them a distinct advantage in the post-impact world. As the dust began to settle and the Earth slowly started to recover, the mammals found themselves in a world that had changed dramatically. The dense forests and rich ecosystems that had supported the dinosaurs were gone, replaced by a barren, inhospitable landscape. But mammals, with their adaptability, were able to exploit the new opportunities presented by this devastated world. Their ability to eat a wide variety of foods, from insects and plants to small animals, gave them the flexibility to survive in environments where resources were scarce. One of the key traits that helped mammals thrive after the extinction event was their warm-blooded nature. Unlike the cold-blooded dinosaurs, which relied on external heat sources to regulate their body temperatures, mammals were able to maintain their body heat regardless of the environment around them. This ability to generate their own heat meant that they were better equipped to survive in the colder, darker world left behind by the asteroid impact. While many large dinosaurs struggled to cope with the sudden temperature drops and lack of sunlight, mammals were able to continue functioning in this harsh environment. Another factor that aided in the survival of mammals was their ability to reproduce more rapidly and in greater numbers compared to dinosaurs. Many dinosaurs had long gestation periods and produced fewer offspring, which made it difficult for their populations to recover from the widespread devastation. Mammals, on the other hand, reproduced more quickly, with many species capable of giving birth to multiple offspring at a time. This rapid reproductive cycle allowed mammals to rebuild their populations more quickly than the dinosaurs could have, giving them a crucial edge in the post-extinction world. As the Earth's climate began to stabilize and ecosystems slowly started to recover, mammals began to diversify and evolve. In the absence of the dinosaurs, mammals moved into new ecological niches, taking advantage of the space left behind by the once dominant reptiles. Over the course of millions of years, these small, primitive mammals evolved into a wide variety of forms, giving rise to some of the most iconic species of the Cenozoic era. During this time, new habitats began to emerge. The world slowly transitioned from the barren, post-impact landscape to one of growing forests, grasslands, and wetlands. This changing environment allowed for the rise of herbivorous mammals, which began to fill the roles once occupied by the plant-eating dinosaurs. Over time, these herbivores evolved into a variety of species, ranging from small, rodent-like creatures to larger herbivores like the ancestors of horses, deer, and elephants. These plant-eating mammals became the foundation of the new ecosystems, much like the herbivorous dinosaurs had been in the previous era. As herbivores thrived, so too did the carnivores that preyed on them. Predatory mammals evolved alongside the herbivores, taking on the roles once held by the large carnivorous dinosaurs. Early carnivorous mammals, such as the ancestors of modern wolves, big cats, and bears, began to emerge, developing sharp teeth, claws, and hunting strategies suited to their new prey. These predators were typically smaller and faster than the massive dinosaurs that had come before them, but they were no less effective in their environments. Over time, these carnivores diversified into a wide range of species, each adapted to the particular conditions of their ecosystems. The rise of mammals was not an immediate or simple process. It took millions of years for mammals to fully establish themselves as the dominant life forms on Earth. During this time, they faced competition from other surviving species, including birds, reptiles, and even some remnants of the ancient reptilian lineages. However, mammals' adaptability and reproductive success ensured their gradual dominance, and they began to shape the ecosystems of the New World. Birds, the only surviving direct descendants of dinosaurs, also underwent a dramatic evolutionary expansion during this period. Modern birds are thought to have evolved from small, theropod dinosaurs that survived the asteroid impact. These early birds were able to take advantage of new opportunities in the post-extinction world, evolving into a wide variety of species that filled different ecological niches. While birds never achieved the same level of dominance that dinosaurs had, they became an essential part of the planet's ecosystems, with species ranging from tiny songbirds to large predators like eagles and vultures. Birds, like mammals, adapted to the new conditions and flourished in the New World. One of the most important developments during the rise of mammals was the evolution of primates, the group to which humans belong. Primates first appeared around 55 million years ago, during the early Cenozoic era, as small, tree-dwelling creatures. These early primates were adept at living in forests, using their grasping hands and feet to climb and move through the trees. Over time, primates evolved larger brains and more complex behaviors, laying the groundwork for the eventual emergence of humans. As the Cenozoic era progressed, mammals continued to evolve and diversify, spreading to every corner of the Earth. By the time the first human ancestors appeared on the scene, millions of years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, mammals had firmly established themselves as the dominant life forms on the planet. The great megafauna of the Ice Age, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, were some of the most impressive examples of the mammals that had evolved in the wake of the dinosaurs' extinction. These creatures, adapted to the colder climates of the Ice Age, roamed the Earth for thousands of years before eventually succumbing to changing environmental conditions and human activity. The rise of humans is one of the most significant developments in the history of life on Earth, and it is directly linked to the extinction of the dinosaurs. Without the asteroid impact and the subsequent collapse of dinosaur-dominated ecosystems, it is unlikely that mammals would have had the opportunity to evolve into the complex forms we see today, including humans. The extinction of the dinosaurs created a vacuum that allowed mammals, particularly primates, to thrive and evolve into intelligent, tool-using species capable of shaping the world around them. In many ways, the legacy of the dinosaurs lives on in modern life. Birds, the descendants of small theropod dinosaurs, are found in almost every part of the world, filling ecological roles similar to those once held by their dinosaurian ancestors. The rise of mammals, including humans, was made possible by the dinosaurs' extinction, creating a direct connection between these ancient reptiles and modern life. The extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs was a moment of incredible destruction, but it also set the stage for a new era of life on Earth. The end of the dinosaurs marked the beginning of the mammals' rise, leading to the incredible diversity of species we see today. And while the dinosaurs themselves may be gone, their impact on the history of life on Earth continues to be felt. Their extinction shaped the world we live in, allowing new forms of life to emerge, adapt, and evolve into the creatures that now inhabit the planet, including us. The story of the dinosaurs' demise is also the story of life's resilience, adaptability, and endless capacity for change.